Reading for today comes from Psalm 15, the entire psalm, which is just 5 verses. And it's entitled, "Who Shall Abide in God's Sanctuary?" O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor take up a reproach against their neighbors, in whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath, even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest and do not take a bribe against the innocent. Those who do these things shall never be moved. And the second reading is from James, chapter 1, verses 17 through 27. Every generous act of giving, with every perfect gift, is from above, coming down from the Father of lights, with whom there is no variation or shadow due to change. In fulfillment of his own purpose, he gave us birth by the word of truth, so that we would become a kind of first fruits of his creatures. You must understand this, my beloved. Let everyone be quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. For your anger does not produce God's righteousness. Therefore, rid yourselves of all sordidness and rank growth of wickedness, and welcome with meekness the implanted word that has the power to save your souls. But be doers of the word, and not merely hearers who deceive themselves. For if any are hearers of the word and not doers, they are like those who look at themselves in a mirror. For they look at themselves, and on going away immediately forget what they were like. But those who look into the perfect law, the law of liberty, and persevere, being not hearers who forget, but doers who act, they will be blessed in their doing. If any think they are religious and do not bridle their tongues, but deceive their hearts, their religion is worthless. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this: to care for orphans and widows in their distress, and to keep oneself unstained by the world. And the final reading is from Mark chapter 7, verses 1 to 8, and then 14 to 15, and 21 to 23. Now when the Pharisees and some of the scribes who had come from Jerusalem gathered round him, they noticed that some of his disciples were eating with defiled hands, that is, without washing them. For the Pharisees and all the Jews do not eat unless they thoroughly wash their hands, thus observing the tradition of the elders. And they do not eat anything from the market unless they wash it. And there are also many other traditions that they observe: the washing of cups, pots, and bronze kettles. So the Pharisees and the scribes asked him, "Why do your disciples not live according to the tradition of the elders, but eat with defiled hands?" He said to them, "Isaiah prophesied rightly about you hypocrites, as it is written, 'This people honors me with their lips, but their hearts are far from me. In vain do they worship me, teaching human precepts as doctrines. You abandon the commandment of God and hold to human tradition.'" And verses 14 and 15. Then he called the crowd again and said to them, "Listen to me, all of you, and understand. There is nothing outside a person that by going in can defile, but the things that come out are what defile." And then 21 to 23. "For it is from within, from the human heart, that evil intentions come: fornication, theft, murder, adultery, avarice, wickedness, deceit, licentiousness, envy, slander, pride, folly. All these evil things come from within, and they defile a person. May God bless this reading to our hearts and our lives.
In all those lists you find online of excuses why people don't go to church, one that often makes the list is, well, why would I go to church? They're all hypocrites there anyway. They all say one thing and do another. They all say this is important, but go off and live their lives the way they want to on the rest of the week. I think if we're honest, there are days when there's truth in that. There are days when we do say one thing and say, this is very important, and go off and seem to forget it the next hour, next day. But the life of faith calls us to be people with integrity. People who are guided by what we say is important, who are guided by what we say is the crucial way to live our lives. People who are guided to put our faith into our actions, to indeed, as James says, be doers of the word and not hearers only. And that's not to say we're going to get it right all the time, because we, if we're honest, probably won't get it right all the time. But that's where our compass is supposed to point. Psalmist O Lord, who may abide in your tent? Who may dwell on your holy hill? Seems a fair enough question. The answer seems hard to live up to. Those who walk blamelessly and do what is right and speak the truth from their heart, who do not slander with their tongue and do no evil to their friends, nor take up reproach. If we live with integrity, we don't do these things. In whose eyes the wicked are despised, but who honor those who fear the Lord, who stand by their oath even to their hurt, who do not lend money at interest, Do not take a bribe against the innocent. The psalmist reminds us that to be right with God, to be able to stand in God's presence, means we have that level of integrity. Do not slander with your tongue. Do no evil to their friends, nor take up reproach against their neighbors. In some ways, I'm reminded of Polonius' speech to Laertes, which I used to know in its entirety. But I always remember these last few lines from it. And this above all, to thine own self be true, and then it must follow, as the night follows the day, that thou canst not be false to any man. That's what integrity means. Being true to who we fully believe we are. To be true to that person we want to see looking back at us in the mirror. That's what Christ calls us to do. Jesus lives in a world where, in his religious tradition, there are many laws about ritual purity, cleanliness. And one of the things we often forget is that ritual purity and cleanliness in Jewish law is not about sin. It's about something different. Because most of what makes you impure is just things that happen in your daily life. Purity is about returning back to sort of stepping away from that for the moment. It's not about sinfulness. And in fact, some of those laws about cleanliness are probably why some scholars have thought that in the Middle Ages, the Jewish ghettos were often some of the healthiest places in the city, because they did things like washed their hands before they ate. But what Jesus points out is that sometimes we can get too focused on those understandings of what makes you pure and impure, what makes you holy, what makes you acceptable. And you lose track of the other stuff. And this Jesus stands in a firm tradition of prophets like Isaiah and Amos, who both said words similar to, I hate, I despise your festivals. I don't want your fatted calves. I don't want your burnt offerings or your oil. I want you to care for the orphan and the widow. I want you to look after the people who are most vulnerable in your society. I want you to build a world where people don't starve. I might be paraphrasing a little bit because I couldn't remember the exact words. Jesus tells us, standing in that prophetic tradition, that to live with integrity isn't just about saying the right words or washing your hands. It isn't about the rituals. It's about caring for each other. That's what it is all about. That's what it means to live with integrity. And the reason why so many people have looked at the church and looked at our grandiose statements. Gandhi is reported to have said, I like your Christ. Not so crazy about your Christians, but I like your Christ. If you were more like him, one of the things that some of the generational research suggests now is that millennials, or whatever we're calling those generations that come after me, but to a degree even earlier generations, are no longer attached to organizations because they're the organization. They no longer support a church or the Rotary Club or the Kiwanis or scouting or guiding because of the virtue of the organization. They support the organizations because the organizations are doing something, because they're making a difference. Because they are, as James might say, doers of the word. They're putting their faith in action. We are called to live with integrity, to make our actions match our words, to be true to that vision that God has cast before us. Jesus points out that what really makes us, to use his language, impure, defiled, what really makes us fall away from that path of integrity aren't the things we eat, aren't whether or not we wash our hands. Those are just important for health. What really, really matters are the things that come out of our hearts, are our words and our actions. In this world where there is so much cynicism about organizations, about leadership, whether it's politicians, churches, schools, health systems, where there's so much cynicism and distrust, integrity becomes more and more important. Not that it was ever unimportant, but I think it's becoming more and more important because people's filters, they don't accept the minor slips as much as we used to. And if we're honest, there was a time when people in leadership could make some pretty major slips and they'd say, oh, that's okay. But integrity becomes more and more important as people's willingness to tolerate the slip-ups narrows. In the church, we're called not only to say the words and sing the hymns and practice the rituals. In the church, we're called to live the faith, to have our actions match our words. It's a high and holy calling. It's not always easy. One of the lines in that psalm was the one referred to the person who keeps the oath even when it's to their own detriment. Sometimes living it with integrity means we do things that don't seem to profit us very well. But because we know it's the right thing to do. Because we know it's important. I suspect that may be where it's easiest to slip up. But behind all this call to integrity, behind all this call to live our faith, lies the foundation. Okay, it should be under. Foundations lie under things, not behind things. My metaphor was a little off. But that foundation is in the God who loves us so much that even when we slip up, doesn't say, you had your chance. The same God who calls us to live with integrity and put our faith in action and have our words match our deeds gives us the grace, knowing we will sometimes miss the mark, and says, come back, try again. You'll do better next time. God not only calls us to live in integrity, God helps us to live with integrity. God helps us forgive ourselves when we slip up, so that next time we can do better. May our words match our deeds. May our deeds match our words. May we put our faith in action so that when we look in the mirror, we see the person we want to see. And may God help us all. Amen.